As always, sisters and brothers of direct African, Archibalan, Aboriginal ancestry, mothers of mothers, and fathers of humanity and of human civilization and culture, I greet you, Amani na Upendo. That simply means peace and love. And I also greet all of you in the audio video audience. Ma'at Hotep, Namaste, Namaskar, Shalom, Assalamu Alaikum, Harambe, and Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a South African concept or word that simply means I am because we are, and because we are, therefore I am. I'm your brother Mwanga Sadaka Muntu Nemsayu, and we thank you for wisely tuning in to another awesome and amazing, mind-quaking, soul-shaking, and spirit-stirring episode of Purge, Purify, and Renew Your Mind. Purge, Purify, and Renew Your Mind. Coming to you from the backwoods, muddy waters, sugar ditches, dirt roads, railroad tracks, cotton field, swamps, rattlesnake plantations, mockingbirds, and magnolia trees of Greenville and Delta, Mississippi. Yes, Greenville and Delta, Mississippi. For those of you who may not know, the primary purpose of this educational episode and all other episodes to follow: purge, purify, renew, and enlighten your mind, empower people, enrich and transform as many lives as possible for the better. Again, the primary purpose of these episodes are to purge, purify, renew, enlighten minds, empower people, enrich, and transform as many lives as possible for the better. With all of the above being said, our topic for today is so-called black people everywhere. We are not our own worst enemy. Again, our topic is so-called black people everywhere. We are not our own worst enemy. Ponder over that. First of all, let it be known and understood that I truly understand what some of us mean when we say we are our own worst enemy. I realize and feel the depths of our hurt, our pain, our agony, and our frustration. And to say and take the position that we are not our own worst enemy is not to deny and turn a blind eye to the hurt, the pain, the agony and frustration, the death, the decay and destruction that we cause to ourselves. It's not to deny that. But ongoing and continuous research, observation, study, quiet meditation, contemplation, and reflection compels me to take the position that we, so-called black people everywhere, are not our own worst enemy. Contrary to what many of us may think and say and believe, we are not our own worst enemy. Therefore, sisters and brothers, bear with me as I endeavor to dig and dive beneath and beyond the surface of all superficialities to prove that we are not our own worst enemy. In my opinion, any discussion, conversation, and analyzation of any problem with the intent of effectively solving it must first be placed in its broadest context possible. In the broadest context possible. This is the most feasible and intelligent way to get to root causes. So this is what I endeavor to do today in a brief, in a summary way, is just to bring forth and generate and show some of the evidence that prove and show that we are not our worst enemy, contrary to what many of us may think and believe. And as I stated a minute ago, yes, we are doing things to ourselves. We are hurting ourselves. We are paining ourselves. We are killing ourselves. And much, much more. But we are not our own worst enemy. And as I stated also, to solve a problem, to effectively solve a problem, you must get to root causes. The root causes. Not the superficialities, but root causes. If you're seeking and desiring to solve a problem. So this is what we are endeavoring to do today, to demonstrate and bring forth some of the evidence, once again, to show that we are not our worst enemies. And if some of us think and believe that we are our own worst enemy, then we'll end up blaming ourselves for the problem, blaming ourselves for our condition, blaming ourselves for some of the social shortcomings and manifestation of defects. And this is what has happened, and this is what is going on right now, because we live in a sly, slick, and wicked cultural society, as I call it. But anyway, in his classic book that's still in print, Black on Black Violence, The Psychodynamics of Black Self-Annihilation in Service of White Domination. That's the title of the book, by our great ancestor and scholar warrior, Dr. Amos Wilson. And many of you may be familiar with Dr. Wilson because he has many books that he has printed before he made his spiritual transition. And a point of fact, Dr. Wilson was and still is a personal friend of mine, and I knew him in Harlem, New York, and he was a few years older than I. And matter of fact, he was born, or his home or state of birth is Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And he's a great brother. But anyway, in that book, Black on Black Violence, The Psychodynamics of Black Self-Annihilation in Service of White Domination, Dr. Wilson informs us that, quote, time and experience have amply demonstrated that such approaches as just saying no to drugs, or a war on drugs, a war on poverty, and so forth and so on, quote, are overworked, ineffective, and bankrupt. Moreover, Dr. Wilson says, such approaches have not even attacked the primary causal factor in black criminality and violence. And he summarized it and says, white domination. And I add to that, I say so-called white domination, because I have never actually seen a so-called white person. Now, I know of people who define and classify themselves as white, but they are not white. But anyway, Dr. Wilson he stated that we have not attacked what he called the primary source in black community of criminality and violence, which is white domination. That's the context, whether we like it or not, whether we deny it or not. That's the context. And I'm thinking of another brother, Dr. Neely Fuller. And I'm going to paraphrase his timeless statement. As a matter of fact, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, she used his statement as a premise for all of her psychiatric and psychological work that she brought to us over the years before she made her spiritual transition a few years ago. But Dr. Neely Fuller stated, and this is a paraphrasing, he stated, that if we don't know and understand white domination, cultural white domination, global white domination, exploitation, degradation, how it functions and operates, not just on a local level, not just on a regional level, not just on a national level, but a global level. He said if we do not know and understand how white domination, the cultural power system of white domination and institutional racism function and operate, then we'll be in a state of confusion. Everything that we think that we know and understand will only confuse us, and we are confused. It's just what the Temptation with their song said, a ball of confusion. Our mentalities, our family life, our male-female relationship, our neighborhoods, our so-called community is in a state of confusion, a ball of confusion. So with that being said, that's the premise of what I endeavor to bring forth, again, to show and demonstrate that we are not our own worst enemy. And here's the book. I need another one now, but this is the book that I made that earlier quote by Dr. Amos Wilson, called Black on Black Violence, the Psychodynamics of Black Self-Annihilation in Service of White Domination. In service of white domination. I won't get into this book at this time. I won't get into this book at this time, but here's a classic book of his also called The Falsification of African Consciousness, Eurocentric History, Psychiatry, and the Politics of White Supremacy or White Domination. I mean, we have many books before us, and we have many books that's not here on this table before me right now that our great scholars and warriors have brought forth on every aspect of life, who have made spent their life doing the homework, doing the research, or doing the analysis, right, the investigation, and bringing forth the evidence, the accurate knowledge and truth that we need, so that we can break the mental and psychological and spiritual shackles around our minds. And we are in denial of that. Because how can a people, as I stated once before on a previous episode, that how can a people who have been robbed of their mother tongue, robbed of their culture, robbed of their total way of life, enslaved for 400 or 500 years, right? How can they go through that and much, much more and still have their mindset still intact, still have their belief system based on knowledge and truth and their culture intact? Our minds, what I'm trying to say, our minds have been twisted and we are in denial. We walking around like Frankenstein monster because in a social sense, or economic sense, or political sense, intellectual sense, we are that damn Frankenstein monster. We are that. But true healing will never start or be initiated until we come out of denial. It's okay to recognize and identify and say that we have been damaged mentally, physically, socially, economically, politically, educationally, and so forth and so on. It's okay. Because if we don't accept that and recognize that, then the healing, the true holistic healing that we yearn for, that we desire, would never take place. It would never happen. Matter of fact, it would just be a dream. And as Langston Hughes with one of his poems, it would be a dream deferred. That's exactly what it is. We need a vision today. We need a vision. That vision must be rooted and based on truth, evidence. We need a vision. And as I'm stating what I'm stating, I'm reminded of 2 or 3 verses that I almost quote in most of my conversations with family, friends, and so-called enemies. You know, the first verse is 1 Thessalonians, the 5th chapter, 21st verse. And it says, prove all things and hold fast to that which is good. And the first thought or idea that should come up in most of our minds is, what does it mean to prove something? That's a good question, good thought. To prove something means to test something, to weigh it, to sift it, to examine it, to look into it. Right? Not to believe everything. The verse didn't say believe everything or believe all things. It says prove all things. And then after the proving, at that point in time, whatever stands up to our proving, to our testing, to our weighing, to our sifting, to our meticulous examination, we hold fast to that. We hold fast to that. That's what we need today. That's what we should be about today. Proving. Because we live the so-called age of duality, of Piscean age, is over with. But the effects of it still lingers on his deathbed. We have entered into what's called the age of Aquarius. In any age is 2,160 years. So the age of Aquarius, which is 2,160 years, this scientific talk I'm talking about. This is not hocus pocus. This is not something that you read in the daily newspaper, you know, talking about a horoscope or talking about the signs of the zodiac, that's of the devil. No, it's right there in your religious book. It's right there in your Bible. You turn to Job, it's right there where he talks about the Mazarek. That's the zodiac, and it's all through there. But that's not my point right now. That's not my point. But we have entered into a new age, and this age is called the Aquarian age. That's an age through time and through what researchers and scholars say is called the golden age, because it's an age of awakening. It's an age of renewing, of spiritual awareness. It's an age of spiritual growth and development. It's an age what's called in an umbrella way of unity consciousness, coming to a clear, crystal clarity of what truth is, what actual facts is, what spiritual and natural laws are. That's the age we have entered. And in a nutshell, this is some of what we witness as we look around in our environment, as we look around, look at ourselves, we look at our family institution, we look at the social structure on a national level, or global level, and local level, and regional, statewide, however you look at it. We see people are coming out of these false institutions, the institutions that have more or less mentally handcuffed people, and kept us, the masses of people, in bondage to what I call false ideals, lies, beliefs and concepts, hypocrisy. That's the Piscean age. That age is dead and is dying. It's on his deathbed. But we have come out of that age. The transition in the universe has already taken place, and many of us, we are still asleep. So this is one of the purposes of these shows, or this episode, purge and purify and renew your mind. This is what it's all about. Here's a brief definition of enemy, an enemy. And my topic is, as I stated earlier, and I state again, is so-called black people. We are not our own worst enemy. What is an enemy? Briefly, an enemy is a person or people who are actively opposed or hostile to another person or people or something. An opposition, an adversary. An adversary. Then the word worse that's in that topic. Worse. What does that mean? Some of you by this time should have already gone and got your dictionary if you have one. Really should have looked it up. I mean, matter of fact, you may not even have an actual dictionary, but you got one on your cell phone, got one on your laptop. I mean, you should be telling me in depth what an enemy and worse mean. But worse, in a brief way, is an adjective or what's called a superlative of bad and ill, meaning bad or ill in the highest, greatest, or most extreme degree. Think about that. Worse, an adjective or superlative of the word bad and ill, meaning bad or ill in the highest, greatest, or the most extreme degree. So what I'm saying, in the position, if I was in a part of a debate, I would take the position that we are not our own worst enemy. And looking at that word, worst, highest, greatest, or most extreme degree. Yes, we are doing things to ourselves. We are hurting ourselves. We are killing ourselves. We are murdering ourselves and others. Many of us, not all, but many of us. And we have been skillfully maneuvered into this, whether we know it or not, whether we realize it or not. And this topic, I mean, it would take many episodes to do justice to it. And then we will have only scratched the surface. And I was listening to a video someone sent me a few days ago. I think it's a recent video of Ricky Smiley, where he made the statement, not only him, but he made the statement in his video that we are our own worst enemy. And I understood, and I understand, understand what he and others mean who make that statement. Because it's out of frustration, it's out of pain, it's out of agony of what we are doing to ourselves on the surface. But if we're looking for root causes, and you will look for root causes when you're trying to effectively solve a problem or understand a problem. You got to break it down to its least common denominator and get to root causes. Because the damage that we are doing, the harm that we are doing, the hurt and the pain that we are causing to ourselves is not stemming from root causes. Therefore, sisters and brothers, and my endeavor on this episode to make it brief as possible, and because I realize, and many of us realize, our short attention span, and it's not by an accident, it's by design. We have shorter attention span, especially when we need to pay, give attention to that which is life enhancing. That which is life enhancing. That which is bring about a more abundant life that we desire, that we seeking, and that we realize and understand that we should have, the happiness and so forth and so on. So it's not an accident, it's by design, our short attention span. Because if it don't have that swing to it, as we call it, or that pop to it, or that zap to it, we fall asleep. we get up and run away, walk away, crawl away. Because if it don't have that thump to it, and we done got conditioned to the thump, and don't question and look at the contents. You know, if the music not going around and dancing and moving in our head, you know, the singing, the swaying of the body, the harmony. I know you know what I'm talking about, because many of us we realize this, have got this from our religious institution, and that's a topic for another time and another day, and sometime sooner. But I remember Brother Malcolm X, also known as El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, and he also, in the last year of his life, received another name from some Nigerian students, the name Omar Wali. And Omar Wali in the Yoruba language meant one who has returned, or the son who has come home. So he acquired that name when he gave a speech in Nigeria to some Nigerian students, and they honored him with that name. But in a Chicago debate on May 23rd, 1964, great ancestor Malcolm X stated, and this quote, "We, the 22 million African Americans at that time, the victims, will do better to spend our time removing the scars from our people, scars left by 400 years of inhumane treatment in America." And he used the word scars. I mean, and so you can apply the word spell or diction. I mean, they all are stating the same thing. They're interchangeable. But he said we will do better to spend our time removing the scars, the spells, the addiction, the denial from our people. Scars and spells and addiction left by 400 years of inhumane treatment in America. And real quickly, and be quick but not hurry, and I just want to put out there some food for thought so you can do some homework and research on, and try to bring to a close and show with this episode in a brief way that we are not our own worst enemy. How is it possible? I'm asking the question. How is it possible to be our own worst enemy without considering, as I stated in the beginning, how we have been robbed of our culture? And the culture is a total way of life of a people. Robbed of our mother tongues, the various languages that we spoke as a people. Right? Robbed of our family institution and structure. Robbed of our economic systems, how we did business. As a matter of fact, in a nutshell, a culture of any people is 7 basic areas that make up culture, according to another great scholar, Dr. Maulana Karinga, and many of you know him as the creator of the so-called holiday or social celebration that we call Kwanzaa. He's still living in Los Angeles, California, great scholar among us. But according to him, all people have 7 core areas of culture, and he labeled them as history, religion or spirituality, and moral ethics. That's 2. 3, social organization. You know, that consists of your family structure and all the other arrangements coming up under the social organization. Your economic organization. 5 is what's called the creative production. And most people, most of us, that's not that five. The fifth one is political organization. Then your sixth one is creative production. And most people, we think, and it's not an accident, that what's called creative production, which is your art, your literature, your writing, your singing, poems and stuff like that, that's the totality of culture. But that's an aspect of culture, and that comes up under creative production. And the seventh core area is called ethos. That's your psychological viewpoint and understanding of how people see themselves on the other six levels. So that's culture. And it's a total way of life of a people. And all people have their culture. And in a nutshell, of people's culture is their mind, their mental and spiritual orientation towards themselves, towards others, towards nature, and towards the universe. So if a people are robbed of their culture, they are really and truly robbed of their minds, and they are out of their minds. And if they're practicing and living in the culture or the mindset of another people, then they are crazy. They are out of their mind because they are out of their culture, which is their mind. So we got suffering from cultural scars. How can you forget and not pay attention to cultural scars, or mental and psychological scars and spells and addiction, or emotional scars, sexual scars, religious scars and spells and addiction, economic scars and spells and addiction, social scars, spells and addiction, biological scars, spells and addiction, political scars. What about the Ku Klux Klan scars? I'm just going, giving a historical reference to certain, can I say, relationships or effects or systems and tools that have been used against our own best interest. And I'm still trying to hammer home that we are not our own worst enemy. When we know and understand some of what I'm saying now and all what I have been trying to say, it's a spiritual, mathematical, scientific impossibility for us to be our own worst enemy. And we need to come out of it. Colonialism scars. How many? Research that. Look up the Berlin Conference, when most, I think it was like from 1885, when most of the so-called European countries or so-called European powers, when they got together and they sliced and diced the continent of Africa, that's called Africa, up, sliced it up and diced it up like a pie, and each one of the European powers acquired so-called ownership of various countries or nations of the continent of Africa for a few hundred years. That's called, that was the Berlin Conference. These people got together. The Western countries got together. Even though they may have argued and fought with one another, but they were on one accord when it came to you and I, for domination, exploitation, and degradation. They were on one accord then, and they're on one accord now. It's just you and I don't know it. And I'm reminded of a great scholar, ancestor, Dr. John Henry Clark. I knew him personally, but he's from Alabama. But he lived all his days of his life in Harlem, New York. Great master teacher. Great master teacher. Some of his speeches are on YouTube right now. And you can get them from other sources. He wrote books. Matter of fact, he was a personal friend of most of the people that we know. He's a personal friend of Ossie Davis, Malcolm. He was a historical outside man for historical information to Malcolm X. That was Malcolm X. They say that he had a cabinet of people that fed him knowledge and information and resources that were not a part of the so-called Nation of Islam at that time. Dr. John Henry Clark. But the quote or the statement that I remember him saying is that we as a people, so-called black people, we have no friends. The only friend that we will ever have is to be a friend to ourselves and know what that means. He said the reason why we don't have friends, because all other people, all other so-called ethnic groups, historically and now, have benefited from our suffering, have benefited from our hurt, have benefited and profited from our death, decay, and destruction. Up to today, he said, we don't owe anybody anything, left, right, or center. He said, if we owe anybody anything, we owe them a good ass whooping. That's Dr. John Henry Clark, great master teacher. Check his work out. But what about the neo-colonialism scars? Those are the scars and spells of neo-colonialism and addiction that were put in place after the so-called colonialism. Neo-colonialism is the illusion that black people, and particularly on the African continent and even in the Western hemisphere that we call America, where they put so-called black faces in political offices. And it really is just a deception. It's a form of technology, because you really only have a black face still on white power and domination. That's neo-colonialism. What about the Tuskegee syphilis experiment? Scars, spells, addiction that were administered on, if I'm recalling it correctly, like at least 400 men that were injected or had syphilis, and the experimenter knew that they had syphilis, and this went on for almost 40 years. I think from around 1932 to the 70s. I mean, doing research, biological and chemical research on black men.